The first call came before sunrise. I didn't even need to listen to the voicemail to know someone had finally read my letter. I let the phone ring until it stopped. I made coffee. I stood by the kitchen window and watched the streetlights flicker off one by one. Whatever panic was waiting on the other end could wait a few more minutes. I had learned that silence, used correctly, is a kind of language. Before I explain why that call mattered, I need to go back. Not to the meeting, not to the letter, to the years before anyone thought I was expendable. I joined Northlake Systems when I was 25. Back then, it was a regional software firm tucked into a concrete building near the river. The kind of place where people stayed late because they wanted to finish the work, not because anyone told them to. I started as an operations analyst with a borrowed desk and a computer that overheated if you opened too many spreadsheets. I thought I would stay 2 years, maybe 3. I stayed 22. By the time the new executives arrived, I had grown into a role that did not fit neatly on an org chart. I ran global operations, but what that really meant was memory. I knew which client contracts could not be rushed. I knew which vendors failed quietly if you pushed them too hard. I knew why certain systems were built the wrong way on purpose, because the right way had broken something 10 years earlier. When something went wrong, people did not look it up. They asked me. That was my mistake. I assumed being useful was the same thing as being safe. The acquisition was announced in early spring. A holding company from the East Coast. Polished branding. Big promises. Ethan Caldwell was introduced as the new CEO. Young, confident, full of language about alignment and efficiency. Mark Holloway arrived with spreadsheets that turned people into cost centers. Julian Reeves spoke about streamlining in a way that made experience sound like clutter. They held a town hall and told us nothing would change. That is how I knew everything would. I did not panic. I did not confront anyone. I updated my resume quietly and started documenting my work more carefully than I ever had before. Emails, processes, decisions, contracts. Not because I planned to fight, but because I had seen what happens when knowledge disappears overnight. I wanted a record of what I had built. The first layoffs happened a month later, all senior people, all replaced within weeks. HR called it reorganization. I called it a warning. My turn came slowly. Meetings I used to run were reassigned. Projects I had led for years were handed to people who nodded a lot and asked questions they should not have needed to ask. In one meeting, Ethan referred to my approach as outdated. He said it lightly, like an observation, not an accusation. That was worse. I kept doing my job. I kept notes. I kept my composure. Then one Friday afternoon, I was asked to step into a conference room I did not usually use. Laura Benson from HR was already there. So were Ethan, Mark, and Julian. They sat on one side of the table. The other side was empty. They did not yell. They did not threaten. They did not need to. Ethan explained that my position was being eliminated. Mark added that there was an alternative role available if I wanted to apply for it. The salary was less than half of what I earned. The responsibilities were almost identical. They slid papers toward me. 2 options: resign or be terminated. They gave me 30 minutes. I remember thinking how calm the room felt, how practiced they all looked. This was routine for them. It was supposed to be routine for me too. I told them I needed time to write my resignation. They hesitated, just long enough to realize they could not refuse without saying the quiet part out loud. Laura nodded. I was told to have it ready by the end of the day. I left the room, went back to my office, and closed the door. My hands did not shake. I already knew what I was going to send them. I had written it weeks earlier with the help of Diane Keller, an employment attorney who understood contracts the way surgeons understand anatomy. We had spent hours on one sentence. I printed the letter. I signed it. I handed it over without explanation. They accepted it just as easily. 5 days later, my phone rang before sunrise. That was when I knew they had finally read it. The voicemail sat there, unopened, while I finished my coffee. When I finally listened, the voice was careful in the way lawyers get when they are trying not to sound worried. This is Nathan Brooks calling. Please return my call as soon as possible. We need to clarify some language in your resignation letter. Clarify. That word told me everything. I called back an hour later, not immediately, not urgently. Calm people control the clock. Nathan introduced himself again, slower this time, as if I might not have understood the first message. He said there seemed to be confusion about when my resignation actually took effect. I told him there was no confusion at all. There was just reading comprehension. I explained that my resignation was effective upon completion of all compensation, benefits, and obligations owed to me under my employment agreement and applicable law. Until then, I remained employed. There was silence, long enough that I checked the call had not dropped. Nathan asked me to repeat myself. I did, slower. He asked what I believed the company owed me. I told him I had a list. A very thorough one. What followed was not shouting or threats. It was something quieter and much more revealing. Papers moving. A breath taken too sharply. Someone whispering in the background. The sound of people realizing they had skipped a step they could not undo. I walked him through it methodically. Unused vacation time. Outstanding reimbursements. Deferred compensation clauses that triggered under a change of control. Performance incentives written into agreements no one had bothered to reread after the acquisition. Benefits continuation. Severance terms buried in an appendix no one thought applied anymore. With every item, the silence stretched longer. Nathan finally said the number out loud. His voice cracked when he did. That is significantly more than what was discussed during your exit meeting. I reminded him that the exit meeting was not a negotiation. It was an ultimatum, and ultimatums do not override contracts. He told me they would contest my interpretation. I told him they were welcome to try. I also told him that until the matter was resolved, I was still an employee, still accruing salary, still covered by benefits, still entitled to access. The call ended politely, too politely. Less than an hour later, my work email lit up again, access restored. A calendar invite appeared for a meeting I no longer planned to attend. Someone somewhere had panicked and reversed a lockout they should never have initiated. Then Mark called. He did not bother with greetings. He asked what I thought I was doing. I told him exactly what I was doing. I was enforcing the contract they had signed and forgotten. He accused me of tricking them. I reminded him that nothing in my letter was hidden. It was one sentence. Anyone could have read it. 4 people had signed off on it without doing so. That was not strategy on my part. That was negligence on theirs. By the end of that day, I was copied on an email chain that was never meant for me. Subject line marked urgent. Multiple outside law firms weighing in with the same conclusion. The resignation was conditional. The company had accepted it. The exposure was real. Diane called me that evening. She was smiling. I could hear it in her voice. They are going to try to settle, she said. They will start low. Do not react emotionally. Let them move. The first offer came the next morning. A large number meant to sound generous. I declined without countering. The second offer arrived that afternoon. Higher, still insufficient, still framed as a favor. I waited. By the third call, the tone had changed. Nathan no longer asked for clarification. He asked what it would take to end the situation cleanly. I told him the truth, exactly what the contract required, plus documented legal costs, plus written confirmation of my professional record. No character assassinations disguised as restructuring language. No quiet smears. He said the CEO would never agree to that. I told him then the matter would proceed. There was a pause. Then he asked for 24 hours. What they did not understand was that I was no longer negotiating from fear. I had already lost the job they thought they were taking from me. All that remained was the agreement they had underestimated. The following evening, the call came back. Shorter, direct. Acceptance. The wire transfer arrived weeks later. The letter of recommendation came with it, polished, complimentary, carefully worded by someone who understood consequences. When I signed the final settlement, my resignation became effective at last. And just like that, the story they thought they controlled was no longer theirs to tell. The last document I signed did not feel dramatic. No shaking hands, no victory rush, just a quiet sense of closure. After more than 2 decades, my relationship with the company ended not with a farewell party or a speech, but with a timestamp and a wire confirmation. That felt appropriate. For a while afterward, I slept more than I had in years. Not because I was tired, but because my nervous system finally believed the danger had passed. When your value is questioned long enough, your body stays alert even when your mind tells it to relax. People assume moments like this end with celebration. Mine ended with silence. I turned off my alarm. I stopped checking email. I walked during daylight hours instead of squeezing movement between meetings. I let myself feel the strange grief that comes with leaving a place that shaped who you became, even when that place tried to erase you. The company moved on quickly, or at least it tried to. Within months, former colleagues reached out in private messages, not congratulations, questions. They were being asked to accept reduced roles, temporary assignments that never ended, performance reviews that suddenly referenced vague concerns no one had mentioned before. I did not tell them what to do. I told them what I had learned. Read your contract. Save your records. Do not assume fairness is automatic, and never rush when someone gives you a deadline that benefits only them. Some listened. Some did not. A few called Diane. I heard later that leadership did not last. Targets were missed. Clients left quietly. Systems failed in ways that were not dramatic enough to make headlines, but costly enough to change careers. It turns out efficiency without understanding is just speed toward the wrong outcome. As for me, I did not replace one corporate role with another. I consult selectively now. I choose my clients. I set my hours. I charge for clarity, not availability. More importantly, I talk to people who feel what I once felt. That subtle dread. That sense of being slowly pushed out while being told everything is fine. I help them prepare, not to fight, but to stand on solid ground if the moment comes. The letter was never about revenge. It was about language, about knowing that words, when chosen carefully, can change who holds power in a room. I did not raise my voice. I did not threaten. I did not argue. I waited. And sometimes that is enough. If this story resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you want more real stories about power, work, and quiet resilience, subscribing helps this channel reach the right people.